Chapter 2 of My Name is Brian. Chapter 2, Brian, 2 points. That night I have a terrible nightmare. An army of huge gray rocks, each as tall as a refrigerator, are chasing me. I'm screaming for help as I try to run away from them. I'm out of breath. The monster rocks are falling toward me. They are going to bury me. I'll be crushed to death. I scream, but no sound comes out. I wake up. I open my eyes and look around frantically. There are no big, oddly shaped gray rocks, just my attic bedroom with its slanty ceiling. I'm sweating and breathing hard as if I'd really been running. Have you ever had that happen when you have a bad dream and you wake up and it feels like it was real? I've had this nightmare before. I get out of bed and head down to the bathroom, thinking about how my nightmare is like a monster movie. I decide to ride my bike over to Dan's house after breakfast and tell him that I'm going to quit renting monster movies with him. Then I remember that Dan and I won't be watching any movies today, or cruising around on our bikes, or hanging out with John and Richie at the hideout. I remember that summer is over. So does my mother, who yells up the staircase, "First day of school, Brian, put a move on." School. I hate it. I open the bathroom door. "Hey, I'm in here," my sister Hillary yells. She's standing at the bathroom mirror putting on lipstick. "Hurry up," I tell her. I scrunch my nose and sniff. Phew. You smell like a perfume factory. "It's better than smelling like your breath," she says as she pushes by me. "That smells like old garbage." "Oh yeah, your breath smells like..." Before I can think of something worse than garbage, she says, "Just kidding. How do I look?" I check her out. Same brownish hair pulled back in a ponytail. Same 5 feet 2 inches tall. Same crooked smile showing a mouth full of braces. Something is printed across her royal blue sweatshirt in yellow letters. I guess it's the name of our high school, Housatonic Regional High. "You look like usual," I tell her. "Nice shirt." She grunts a thanks and reminds me that now she's in high school, she'll be taking the bus while I'll still have to bike or walk to Sharon Center School. When I come into the kitchen a few minutes later, my little brother Tyson starts up his morning chant of "Brian, Brian, Brian." I sit in my regular chair next to his high chair and give him a high five, low five, slide five, and shake out some cereal for myself. Tyson is the person I get along with best in our family. Hillary says that's because he's 2.5 years old and I have the mind of a 2-year-old. "Brian," my mom says, "it's almost 8 o'clock. You'll have to start getting up earlier. No notes from school this year about lateness. Where are your new school supplies?" "Upstairs," I say through a slurp of milky cereal. "Don't answer with food in your mouth," she scolds. My father's at the counter rolling up architectural plans for an addition he's building on somebody's house. "Brian, I don't want to be called up to that school this year," he scolds. "Do you understand?" He walks over and glares down at me. I continue eating my cereal while he lectures. "No more goofing off. I want to see some hard work out of you this year." He taps me on the head with his roll of plans. "I want to see results. The day I have to go to that school is the day you say goodbye to your karate lessons." Tyson pulls on my sleeve. "Do karate, do karate." "Now I'm late," my dad grumbles to my mom as he picks up his lunch pail and heads out the back door. He says it like it's my fault. As I get up from the table, I do a front snap kick. Tyson claps happily and chants, "Karate, karate." So I do another kick. Unfortunately, this one hits the leg of Hillary's chair just as she's stuffing a spoonful of cereal and milk into her mouth. "Mom," my sister screams, "look what Brian did." White milk drips down the front of her bright blue sweatshirt. "You jerk," she yells. "Sorry," I yell back as I hustle out of the room. "Gotta go." Under my bed, I find the paper bag with my new school supplies. I sit on the floor and flip through the bright red notebook. 150 clean white pages separated into 5 sections by yellow dividers. I think, it's a new school year. Maybe this year I'll start out good, right from the beginning. I'll do all my homework and pay attention in class. I'm as smart as anybody else. I can do it. I just didn't try hard enough before. This year I'll try real hard, right from the beginning. A new beginning with a new teacher. Naturally, I won't tell the other jokers. I'll keep it a secret from them. But I make a vow to myself. This year, I'll really try. I can do it. Riding my bike to school, I chant with each push of the pedal. I can do it. I can do it. Hey man, wait up. John's bike pulls up next to mine. How's it going? I ask. Great, he says. I heard Miss Olgie quit teaching. We're getting a new teacher who never taught here before. She's probably never taught anywhere. She'll be a bigger pushover than the other one. Think of some jokes, some humdingers, man. He rears up on his back wheel to celebrate. As we go down the hill, I see the school's new shingle roof. Early last spring, they replaced the old leaky roof with a new one. One day, after the crew went home, I went back to school, climbed the scaffolding to the roof, and sat up there. I could see the sun behind the mountains in New York State. Then I saw hundreds of black specks flying toward me in a perfect V-shaped formation. Canada geese, honking like crazy as they flew north. I wonder what it would be like to be a Canada goose. Not the lead one, just one of those riding the current near the back of the line and honking away. All summer I've been thinking about those geese. Geese must be pretty smart to know enough to go north when it's hot in the south and south when it's cold in the north. I decided that they must be communicating to one another with all that honking. I wish I could go up to the roof now and wait for the geese to pass over school on their way south again, but I can't. John and I are riding our bikes into the schoolyard through a bunch of noisy kids. Get off those bikes, a teacher aide yells. No riding in the yard. Dan and Richie are waiting for us by the bike rack. The bell rings. Everyone else goes in, but we hang back, talking about how much we hate school. Until the principal, Miss Friedman, shouts, "Let's go, gentlemen." We pretend we don't hear her. None of us wants to be the first to do what she says. Miss Friedman claps her hands and shouts impatiently, "Now!" "School," Richie says as we finally go into the building. I hate it. John looks around. This place is like prison. Yeah, Dan agrees. The pits. I say, it's the worst. But I'm thinking about how I'm going to try hard, right from the first day. I'm thinking I can do it this time. A tall black man with gray hair, dressed in a dark blue suit, a man as big as any prize fighter, is standing in front of the doorway of room 106. Before I can whisper to my friends, "Who's that?" he turns sharply and faces us. "I've been waiting for you," he says in a deep growl of a voice. He gives each of us a stern look. The 4 of us stop dead in our tracks. I shiver with fear because I know who he is. This man is a plainclothes cop. He knows about our hideout. He knows that we ignored the no trespassing sign hundreds of times. He knows that we broke into the Colgate mansion. He will arrest us. He takes a step toward us, looks us each right in the eye and says, "I'm Mr. Bigham, your 6th grade teacher. And you gentlemen are?" I managed to stammer, "Brian Toomey, sir." After we've all introduced ourselves, Mr. Bigham puts out his arm to show us that we should go into the room ahead of him. As John passes in front of Mr. Bigham, he looks up at him and says, "We can sit anywhere we want, right?" "Wrong," Mr. Bigham answers. "There are name cards on the desks." He immediately starts giving directions to the class so we don't have time to start fooling around. even if we dared. I know that Mr. Bigham already knows that we are the troublemakers, because he has our desks as far away from one another as possible. I'm stuck between Jay Preston and Isabel Morris. They were the biggest brains in 5th grade and the biggest pains. My luck. I see Isabel give Jay a look that says she isn't too happy to be sitting next to me either. It's easy to be a good student for the first hour. All we have to do is listen to announcements over the loudspeaker and to Mr. Bigham's speech about doing good right from the beginning of the year. That's what I plan to do anyway. Then he makes a list on the board of our suggestions for good classroom management. I don't think Mr. Bigham will have trouble managing a classroom. It's hard to imagine anyone having the courage to do a hand fart when Mr. Bigham bends over. During recess, the Jokers Club has an emergency meeting by the bike rack. "This is going to be a miserable year," Richie says. "He's scary." "Like some kind of bionic man," Dan says. "I bet he lifts weights all the time." "I wonder where he came from," I ask. "Maybe he's an ex-con," Richie says, "and every once in a while a school has to take one for rehabilitation and stuff." "I bet he wanted to be a football coach, and this is the only job he could get," I say. "Which must make him very mad," Dan adds. "How are we going to make jokes in his room?" Richie asks John. "He'll kill us." "Operation JDBR lives," John says. "Don't let him scare you guys. He's just another person. There's only one of him and 4 of us. We're not going into the boxing ring with him, and there are laws against hitting kids. If he hits one of us, we could sue him and become millionaires." "Dead millionaires," I mumble. The bell rings for the end of recess. We don't wait to be the last, but go right in with the other kids heading back to room 106. "Remember," John whispers, "Operation JDBR lives." Mr. Bigham is waiting for us at the door. As we pass him, he tells us to write our names on the board, last names first. It seems like a silly thing to be doing since he already has a list of our names. I print mine. When we're back in our places, he tells us to alphabetize the names written on the board. That means put them in alphabetical order. I open my notebook and look down at the clean page. I pick up my pencil and silently repeat my vow to do better this year. Then I take a deep breath and look at the board for the last names that begin with A. I copy Andrews, Kieran on my paper. Under it I write Abbott, Kevin. "Class," Mr. Bigham asks, "what do you do if there are 2 or more names that begin with the same letter?" Before anyone else has a chance to think, Isabel waves her hand and says, "Look at the second letter." I glance over at her paper. There are already at least 5 names neatly penned in script. That means cursive. I look at my thick gray pencil marks. The second letter of Andrew is N, and the second letter of Abbott is B. I recite the alphabet to myself. B comes before N. I erase what I'd written. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Isabel. With one hand, she's covering her mouth to hold back a laugh. With the other hand, she's trying to get Jay's attention. When he looks up, she points at me. Jay looks at the board, then at me, and giggles. "Is something wrong, Jason?" Mr. Bigham asks. "It's Brian," Jay answers shyly. "Look how he wrote his name." Mr. Bigham and everyone else in the room looks at the board. I read, Toomey, Brian. What's the big deal? "I'm not the only one who printed," I call out. Other people in the room start laughing. Not your big laugh, but one of those quiet little laughs you would use if you had a teacher who looked like a kid crunching machine. John points at the board. "Brain?" he chortles. That means laughs. Brian, you're a riot, man. Brian the Brain. I love it. He scratches his head. So do Richie and Dan. I've made a joke without even trying. I don't even know what the joke is. Mr. Bigham's actually smiling as he goes up to the board. Very funny, Brian. He says, let's just fix it. Just before Mr. Bigham erases my name, I see my mistake. Brain. I wrote brain instead of Brian. He didn't do it to be funny, Isabel calls out. It was a mistake. Some kids laugh a little louder. It was a joke, I lie. Sure, Isabel mumbles under her breath. Mr. Bigham turns from the board and looks around. Enough, is all he says. The room becomes so quiet you could have heard a kid's bone break. This is a timed assignment, Mr. Bigham announces. 10 more minutes. I look down at my paper. How can I do well in school if I can't even spell my own name right? I look through the list on the board for a name that begins with B, then C, while Mr. Bigham walks around the room checking the work. When he reaches my desk, he leans over and whispers, Brian, alphabetize by last names, not first names. I look at my paper. I've written Anne, Brad, Charlene. Isabel covers her mouth so Mr. Bigham won't see that she's laughing at me again. I hate Isabel. I try to erase the big gray letters. Why did I press down so hard when I wrote? Now I'll never get them off. Big gray letters. Big gray rocks. Being chased by huge rocks. My nightmare comes back. And I realize that the rock monsters were shaped like the letters of the alphabet. They were the alphabet. Big stone alphabet letters crushing me to death. I think about how much I hate the letters of the alphabet and press down even harder on my eraser. My paper rips. Time, Mr. Bigham calls out. Pass your papers forward. That's the end of chapter 2.